Go live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads, along with my co-host and partner, Sean Francis. I am Brian Altunian, and today's conversation is interesting. When you're a parent of a child with special needs, you're thrust into a whole new category of parenting, and something that you can learn over time, or something that you get some guidance. And today's guest not only has one child with special needs, with autism, but she has three children with autism, and she has taken that experience and has transformed it into becoming a guide and a support for other parents. Written a book, and so we're going to talk about that today on today's episode of Just Two Dads. So hang tight. I'm very excited to get today's episode rolling. Again, I am Brian Altunian along with Sean Francis, and this is, I'm supposed to know the episode number. We're in the 180s in our fourth season of Just Two Dads. We started this 4 years ago, and we thought we would have a conversation between the two of us, just two dads, talking about the stuff that we encounter with our own children who have some special needs issues. And it has turned out to be one of the most amazing and fulfilling experiences for us, because we get to talk to and share the stories of amazing people who are serving our community. And today is definitely no exception. We're really excited to get into the conversation with Amber Arrington, an author, as well as a support, a guide, somebody who's really guiding folks in what it means to have a child with an autism diagnosis and all the things that come with it. Before we get into that, we just want to thank you if you're catching us live on Facebook. Leave a comment, say hello, share with your friends. If you're catching us after the fact on our website at justtodadspodcast.com, you can find a backstory. You can see all of our episodes there. Click on the all episodes and you'll see 180 something episodes we've been doing. You can also see us on our YouTube channel, which will be linked on our website. If you want to reach out to us, you have a suggestion of potential guests or other questions for guests that we've had, or you want to get access to products and other things that our guests offer, like today's book that Amber is going to be talking about, hit us up with an email at wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. And really want to thank everybody for catching us on podcast outlets everywhere, and WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Thanks for making us part of your listening day. And finally, a big thank you to our partner and sponsor, Billy Footwear. Billy Price, the founder, has an amazing story, and he took his situation, which caused him to be wheelchair bound, and he transformed that experience into creating adaptive footwear for people of all ages who just have difficulty with their shoes, and they're phenomenal designs. Billy is an amazing story. They always have sales. They have a sale going on right now. If you click on the link on our show notes, you'll get an additional 10% off in addition to the sale price that they already have. So we're huge fans of Billy Price and of Billy Footwear, and we thank them for their sponsorship. And so, again, love them. Go patronize them, because they're doing amazing things. They've sold over a million pairs of shoes, and they're found worldwide. Okay, that's enough for our sponsorship. So without further ado, we're going to get into today's conversation, and I'm going to throw it over to Sean to get us started off. And Sean, how you feeling today, bud? You feeling good?
Yeah, I wonder if the people that listen on a regular basis feel that it's, just, hype or whatever it might be whenever you ask me that question. And I'm like, I'm thankful and I'm blessed. And, what happens is I have challenges like anybody else has in life. And when we sit down to spend this time, have great conversation and add value to other people. But I end up having a extremely deep level of appreciation. And I find that that's taking place, especially of late. I had a birthday last week, which was, a milestone. So it's an interesting time. It gives one a lot to think about. And with that said, I want to jump right into our show today. Our guest today is someone who is a warrior and someone who is giving of themselves and has taken a situation that they have had happen to them in the eyes of many and is doing what I think it takes to make it happen for her, as opposed to the other way around. And she is a mother, as you mentioned, to multiple children, multiple diagnoses, and her entity is known as Autism Savvy. Welcome to Just Two Dads, Amber Arrington.
It's so good to be here. Thank you so much, you guys, for having me.
Oh,
Great to have
it's our pleasure. It's our pleasure. Amber, as we begin the show by telling people, our guests, that in most cases, they probably don't see themselves as heroes. That's actually more of a requirement for being a hero than having a superpower, because you usually don't realize what your superpower is, and it's that natural. But I'm here to tell you that that is exactly what you are, and all heroes and their powers have an origin that comes from someplace. You didn't come from Krypton. You didn't get bitten by a radioactive spider, but I'm sure that where you come from, figuratively and literally, plays a role in everything you do today and how you faced the diagnosis or diagnoses that came your way. Why don't you start with a little bit about where you come from leading up to your family dynamic and where we are today?
Oh man, where do we start? So I've been married for 25 years. We celebrated it March of this year, 25 years.
Congratulations.
Yay! I got real lucky. I got married when I was a baby.
Yeah, clearly.
18.
Yeah.
But we were the first ones married of all of the friends, and we were the last ones to become parents. Growing our families was such a challenge. It took us 20 years to build our family to completion, and that's not an exaggeration.
Wow.
So for us, 5 years in, we were certified to adopt, and then we end up adopting like not one but two babies inside of a really tight time frame. So my oldest two kiddos are only 6 weeks apart from two different birth moms. And then as it turns out, we end up adopting two more babies. I kind of forget the timeline of all this, but 3 of our kids came from the same birth mom. So 2 birth moms, 4 kids, and then I'm raising 4 kids under 4. 2 boys and 2 girls, and all I ever wanted was to be a mom. That's all.
Wow.
So my wish was granted, but you be careful what you wish for, because sometimes you don't realize what those miracles come with. And I'm not saying anything bad, but just being a parent is hard in general.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, that's how. Yeah.
And where did you? So, what was your family dynamic like when you were a child? Did you have a lot of siblings as well? Like adopting, a number of children is one thing, but that's got to come from your desire to be a mom. So, how many? What was your family dynamic like?
I wouldn't say I came from a big family. I guess in the world standards it is, because at this point there's 5 of us, but I'm so much older than the rest. Like I'm 23 years older than one of my sisters.
Wow.
But I would say that came from the cultural, like the religion I was raised in. Family was number one. Family is the most important. The average family in the religion I was raised in would have 4 to 6 kids. So it didn't seem uncommon to us at the time.
Gotcha. And did you grow up?
Where?
Where?
Go ahead, Brian. That was a question. Yeah.
I think the same way.
Where? My husband and I both are native to Arizona.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're still here.
And you're still there. We were before you jumped on, Sean. We were talking about it's going to be over 100 degrees still, in almost October, 100 degrees, and this weekend in Arizona. So that's fascinating. So that makes a lot of sense, right? We've got a family dynamic. You're raising a lot of children, and so that makes some people would look at that and go, 6 children. That's a lot to take on. But you're right. In certain religions, that's whether whatever Orthodox Judaism or Mormon or whatever, like that is standard. That's normal. So that's fascinating. And both from Arizona. And did you go to? How did you meet, you and your husband? Were you childhood friends? Did you meet in school?
No, we didn't go to school together. We met in passing, like right before I graduated high school. He's 3 years older than me, and my mom and his ex-stepdad, it's weird, but they started a charter school together a kindergarten
Okay.
through 8th grade charter school. And so like we had met in passing because of that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Fascinating. That's great. So you've got education in the family. You've got large family dynamic in the family. So this is great. This is, again, why we often ask, and Sean loves this, and I'm a huge fan of understanding the origin, because it does help to, describe, explain, your current situation. Did you have experience when you were younger, or in your younger years, with children with any kind of disability, special needs issues?
No, not at all. But
Okay.
I had two little sisters that I'm like 8 and 9 years older than, at that, growing up, that I grew up with, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, and my mom would work nights. And so I acted like a mom quite a bit.
Sure.
So, familiar with taking like caregiving, and taking care of kiddos, I guess, but not special needs. No.
Mhm. I just noticed just something else just dawned on me. I talked about me having a birthday, which was last week on Friday, and you quietly didn't say anything. Yours was yesterday.
It was.
Oh my gosh. Happy birthday to both of you.
Yeah.
here's
Well,
the thing.
thank you.
Yeah, happy birthday to you, Sean.
Thank you.
I don't much care about my birthday, but my baby, she just turned 4 today. So like hers is the day after mine, and now that's where my
How
focus
cool
goes.
is that? That's where your focus is. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
That's
Well, happy birthday to you. Fantastic.
Yeah, you too.
Now that
Wow,
you're part of the
wow.
circle, by the way, you may get birthday phone calls from Sean where he sings happy birthday, just so you know. Just once
I
you're
would
in the
love
circle.
it.
Yeah.
That's cute.
Leave a message for you with it.
I'll get one out to you. Yes.
That's so cute.
That's fascinating. So then fast forward to when you adopted your children, did they have a diagnosis at the time, or no? They tell us how
No.
that all came about. Okay.
So all of my babies were adopted as babies, different ages of babies, like one straight from the hospital, one at 2 months, one at 4 months, one at 6 weeks.
Okay.
So no, I didn't know about any of that. And so how the story goes is my oldest child, it takes me 12 years to piece together all of his diagnoses,
Oh, wow.
I noticed by age 2 or 3, like we have some problems, but first it was an anxiety, like we think it's an anxiety disorder. And then it was like ADHD. And then we kind of dealt with that for a while, but then there's still some other things. Then it's learning disabilities. And then by age 10, he has an educational designation for autism at school. And then by age 12, a medical diagnosis of autism.
Okay.
Mm.
Interesting.
What's the difference between the latter two?
Age difference?
Education.
No, I'm sorry. The educational versus
medical.
the diagnosis.
Right. So an educational, I think people still say educational diagnosis. Technically, it is not a diagnosis, but right, that's where the school can designate that a child is impacted by a disability such that they would qualify for a 504 plan or an IEP.
Got you. So they acknowledge a learning disability.
An assessment.
Specifically.
It's kind of like an educational assessment of some kind, and then a medical actual diagnosis.
Right. And the educational one will not yield you the same things as the medical one. So
right. The medical one is needed as it relates to benefits and things of that sort and other accommodations. Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was a journey. And with that kiddo, he is now 20. I believe that if I was raising him again right now, he would have an autism diagnosis by age 3 for sure.
I was going to say, yeah, that's when you mentioned that he's 20, I caught that right away, because the further back you go, that's like I always say, in Brian's case, other parents who had children in the 90s and have a diagnosis, you have to be even more of a warrior because the resources were not as plentiful. Right. In terms of or the services, but even the resources that lead you to a diagnosis, trying to figure out why it is that your child doesn't do A, B, or C, or hasn't hit certain milestones yet. Wow.
It's so interesting. Yeah, we've definitely come a long way in 15, 20 years. You guys know.
Yeah, for sure.
So go ahead.
That was it. So then you sort of have an understanding as a parent of what that looks like. And so then how did you, for your other two children that have diagnosis, how did that come about? This, by the way, this is fascinating. This is amazing. So tell us how.
I mean, yeah. Well, okay. So we did IVF, in vitro fertilization, because my husband has spinal cord injury. And so we just could never get pregnant. We tried IVF 3 different times throughout our marriage. And finally, I think I was 38 and we finally have the budget to try again. And we let's try what, because this is going to sound crazy to people. I already had 4 children, but I had this sense for years that I was missing one more little girl. So I was willing, I didn't care how she came. We tried for adoption. We tried through foster care, like embryo adoption. I didn't care. I knew I couldn't get pregnant. So it was just a thing. But eventually we do IVF and it does work. I actually make 4 embryos that are viable and we genetically test them and they're all female embryos. So I'm okay, she's in there. And we end up having our miracle baby Mallory 20 years into marriage. She's 5.5 now. And then I had some leftover embryos, which I never thought would be the case. And by this time, my other kids are so much older. They're between 11 and 16. And so Mallory would grow up like an only child if I didn't have another one, but I'm getting way older at this point. So you can see what we decided to try for one more so Mallory could have a sibling. And so then we have Kennedy and they're not quite 2 years apart. And so now those girls are 4 and 5.5.
And they were the ones with the additional diagnoses?
Yes, they end up with a diagnosis. So my adopted son is autistic, and then my biological baby girls receive autism diagnoses.
Amazing. But you were able to catch it earlier because we're 20 years down the road here now, right? So
no.
Or no. Okay.
No.
Tell us how that happened.
This is the thing. I've been raising an autistic son for 20 years, but I can say that I have learned more about autism in the last 3 years than I ever understood about autism before.
Right.
It's this thing where it's you can be raising an autistic child and still not realize how much you do not understand about neurodiversity and autism. And
yes,
especially when you're not autistic yourself, you're never going to understand it like an autistic person does. So to answer your question, I was not looking for signs. I didn't even know what the signs were. I did not catch it like I would catch it now.
So how did it happen?
So Mallory turned 1 in January. I'm pregnant again in January, and then COVID hits in March. So her whole between 1 and 2 were in COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
I haven't had a baby in 11 years, and we can't go anywhere. And I'm just not catching it because I'm going, first of all, raising Tyson, was really hard for me. It was so challenging. And I associated the word autism with hard. And the thought that my God, higher power, whatever you call it, would give me my miracle baby 20 years in and that she would have autism, did not cross my mind because I'm going to get to sell into the sunset now with my miracle babies, right? Because I paid my dues.
Right.
Yeah. So I just wasn't noticing the delays. I didn't know the developmental milestones to look for. I just expected them to happen. But what did happen, in particular, was I had the last baby and Mallory was not paying any attention to the baby, meaning she would not acknowledge her existence. It was she was a furniture.
Wow.
Most 2-year-old little girls are so excited about a baby and a baby and want to help. And no, she ignored her.
Interesting.
Just eventually I started to come around to the fact that she's not saying mom and dad. She's not clapping, pointing, waving. She's not talking that much. Oh, this hand leading me places. That's not normal. Oh, she's scripting all the time. So what happened was one day after the baby's born, my husband says to me, Amber, do you think there's really something going on with Mallory? And in that moment, it was just like something that said, oh, there really is something going on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that just launched me to call the pediatrician, get early intervention going, schedule an evaluation. And I was so lucky because within 6 weeks, first I had a friend of Tyson's, his mom is a speech therapist who also had an autistic son. And I expressed my concerns, and she came to the house and spent some time with me. Of course, she couldn't diagnose, but I could tell she was concerned and gave me things to start doing with Mallory. And then within 6 weeks, I had a medical diagnosis at 27 months for Mallory.
And at this point, you've got how many diagnoses going on?
Just
two?
the two.
Oh, as far as two children with a diagnosis at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then the youngest.
Mm-hmm. So this one's so crazy because of course now I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be missing a thing. I understand there's like an 18 to 20% chance that a sibling of an autistic kid will also be autistic. So I'm watching milestones like a hawk. Now I know what they are. I think I'm hot stuff. I'm at family's house for Easter where there's a bunch of little kids, and I noticed someone had lined up a bunch of toys in front of the TV. And I'm like, who did that? You know, because we need to keep an eye on that one because I know everything.
Yeah.
Right.
So now Mallory's going to a special ABA-based preschool where there's half autistic kids and half typically developing peers that coexist in these classes together. And my intention is to put baby sister as a typically developing peer with Mallory at the preschool.
Right.
She's hitting her milestones.
Interesting.
I have a whole list in my phone of the milestones that she's meeting. She's talking like all of the things. So, but I take her to go get evaluated to be a typically developing peer at the preschool. And I didn't realize what an intensive process, like how much they vet the peers that would come in. They bring me in for an assessment. I did not realize I was walking into an autism assessment for the baby.
Interesting.
So it's called the ADOS. I don't know if you guys remember that or know that term.
And they do that anyway, just regardless.
They just do it for all of them to screen all of them.
Wow. Okay.
So
Interesting.
baby sister's 18 months old. She's developing. Typically, she's speaking. I want to send her as a peer role model, but they assess her and she like bombs the assessment.
Wow.
And they're like, she needs to we recommend you have her evaluated for autism. And I was like, but what was happening was I thought she was tired. She has a different personality than Mallory. She wanted to leave halfway through. There were little things like she wasn't responding to her name like she should. She wasn't maybe looking at them while she was playing with her toys the way that she should. Subtle things where I'm like, I don't know if I see it, but you're saying so fine. Like they're like, let's try it again on Monday. We do the same ADOS assessment on Monday. She did even worse. So they said, listen, we recommend you have her assessed. We actually have an opening in a week if you can get the paperwork done. And within a week, 1 year to the date, April 29th, and again on April 29th, Kennedy receives her autism diagnosis that I just was not expecting.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
now you're talking about 3 children with a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Amazing. First of all, I love their names. That's awesome. Kennedy and Mallory. That's beautiful. So I would think, and now, so you're going to tell us kind of how this led to, because what you've already said are a bunch of, you've got a bunch of really great pieces of gold here that you're tracking, milestones that they're hitting, and you can track what you were missing. Right. And so how did you decide to take that and then create what you've created? And let's talk about that. And then again, I don't mean to skip over anything if I fill in, if there's anything to fill in, but I mean, this is fascinating. You've got, 20 some different ages here, and you've diagnosis on an older child and now diagnosis on babies. And so what an amazing journey.
It's been an amazing journey. And the thing about Kennedy, the baby, was I felt like at the time I could make a case for the fact that the place where I was sending them to preschool, they really pride themselves on like trying to catch it as early as possible so they
Sure.
can hit that early intervention. And I almost felt like they overdiagnose. And I felt like I could make a case for she's not autistic because she does not present as typically autistic. She still doesn't. But also when she did start toe walking at 16 months, and I remember like saying to my husband, oh my gosh, like, is this a thing? Is there going to be regression? And he would say, Amber, if she's autistic, we will love her just the same. And we know exactly what to do. And so I just decided to lean into it. And I thought that no harm would come from just catching it early if it was that. And, but she doesn't present typically autistic. She actually, I believe, falls on this profile of autism called PDA. Do you guys know about it?
Explain it for people who are listening.
Yeah, I would love to. So it stands for pathological demand avoidance.
Okay.
A kinder way to say it is like persistent drive for autonomy or pervasive drive for autonomy. So these kiddos, like, they essentially can't, their nervous system, the theory is their nervous system is extremely sensitive. What will look to us like defiance, they automatically default to a no. They seem really difficult, very rigid, is actually their body kind of having a panic attack. Like they flip into fight or flight if they perceive anybody above them. They need to be in control of their own world all the time.
It's why we have a spectrum, right? That's literally why we have this, because there's so many, nuances to all of this. But that's fascinating. And being the youngest child of 6, you're born into this hierarchy where there are, older siblings that are in that position. So that's interesting.
Right.
It's difficult.
Well, yeah. And it's like, but I had 6 children. I did not have another one like her. So like, certainly, well, you wouldn't look at her and think, oh, she's autistic, but there is something there that needs to be dealt with in a certain way. And so I'm glad I know, because we've changed the way we parent really all of our kids because of the way she needs to be parented. So that's been really interesting. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And again, great lessons for parents who are dealing with a diagnosis for the first time or early in that diagnosis process where they, your life is altered significantly. It changes dramatically at that time. At least your vision of what you thought your child would, what their life would look like and what your life as a parent would look like is completely shifted. And so thanks for putting that up, Sean. That's awesome. Yeah. So, and I have, it's interesting. I have a client in my financial services business who has a child in their late teens now and has that same diagnosis. And because he's a teenager and male, the only way to provide some mainstream, interaction is to include medication.
I was just gonna say, because
calm that down.
In one of the groups that I belong to on social media, someone, I don't know how old their child is, and I don't know when they were diagnosed, but I'm sure that neither has existed for very long, because they made a post where they said, is it normal for a child with autism to have such a tantrum? I don't know what to do. And it was just before we signed on, so I didn't have a minute to respond, but I was going to respond as I had with other things, which is the first thing to do is understand that the line between tantrum and meltdown can be very, very blurred. And you just, for instance, here in Los Angeles, I don't know, I think it was like a couple months ago, there was a homeless family. The 2 teenage kids were going to the bus stop, and the boy happened to touch a car, and then they sat at the bus stop. And
I saw that video.
And the gentleman driving the car came over and assaulted the kid, slapped him, and people stood up. And I remember somebody made a comment, and this is just a cultural thing. And I can say this as a Black American. The person that responded said, special needs or no special needs, y'all need to make sure you teach these kids manners. And that is the height of ignorance. And then somebody responded by, how cruel. Do you think blah, blah, blah? And I'm saying, wait a minute, this person is responding based on a cultural experience, how they were raised, and what they know. And what some of us have been raised to, to do is just like, you don't talk back, you don't disobey, you don't touch other people's things. But then it leads into what we end the show with all the time, which is questions are so much more powerful than statements. Be more childlike and, less childish. We don't know why somebody does something. And I'm this advocate here on this podcast and blah, blah, blah. And every now and then the lines get blurred to me. And I feel like my son is simply being defiant. And I have to stop and go, wait a second. That's a meltdown and a sensory challenge. That's not somebody just simply misbehaving. It takes work. It's not easy and always, as automatic as one might think.
Definitely.
And it's why we enjoy doing this podcast, because we, first of all, we're learning all the time, and we're learning, empathy and, understanding other people's situation, and hopefully educating folks into, a different way of looking at a situation. So now I want to just ask, let's kind of project so you've got a website and a book. We'll talk about that. How did you take your experience as an amazing mom into being an advocate for other folks? Where did that come from?
It was not intentional in the beginning, as you would imagine. Like, we could never dream up the things that happen in our lives that we end up becoming passionate about and wanting to serve through. For me, it went like this. I actually had a strong desire to write a book, a story of hope, about how we grew our family for 20 years. 20 years, I could never get pregnant. It's an amazing story. And I thought, I want to write a book. Well, then I had this opportunity to connect with a publisher. I joined a woman's mastermind where everybody was writing books in that mastermind. And I was going to write this book about how we grew our family, the miraculous things that happened that way. It was a 6-month commitment. I got 3 months in and I was just like, well, first of all, if you write a book and you don't have a way to market it, then people aren't going to know about your book. So
exactly.
I had the sense you have to build a company around your book, kind of. And I just got 3 months into that book, my story of hope about building a family. And I was like, I don't think this is the book I want to write right now. The world of infertility is sad. It's very sad for people.
Yes.
And a lot of them don't want to hear your story of hope. I started to learn that the more I inserted myself in that world. I was like, I've spent 20 years in this world and I don't want to be in the sad anymore. I don't think I want to write this book right now. I want it for my posterity. I have journaled it all.
Sure.
But I just didn't see where it was going to go.
Right.
And so I'm like, what else do I know a lot about? I paid to write a book. So, I have 3 autistic kids. I'm sure I could write a book about that. And so within 3 months, I wrote that book.
And not atypical motherhood. Atypical, one word, not atypical. Mother, which I think as a great, it's such a descriptive title. It describes exactly your story. It's amazing.
Yep.
Well, and the book I thought I was going to write about autism was not the book I wrote about autism, as it probably goes for many authors. And for sure, writing that book, researching for that book is what completely changed me around what autism really is and autism really isn't.
Wow.
And the subtitle is the guide for navigating a child's new autism diagnosis. I wanted it to be a book that, the book I wish I was given when I left the psychologist's office with that diagnosis in hand. That day that many of us parents will always remember, where we get that diagnosis and we're like, you think you're drowning. You don't know what to think. You don't know what to feel. You don't know where to turn. You don't know where the resources are. You're in a foreign country where you don't speak the language. You don't know where anything is, and you don't have a tour guide. I just wanted to write that book that would be like me sitting down on the couch next to the mom and being like, this is what's going on. It's going to be okay. And this is what you need to know.
We talk about that date of diagnosis. We have since the very first episode we ever did of this podcast. And I remember, for me, our neurologist was talking, and all I heard was, Peanuts cartoon wah, 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 for 2 hours. I'm like, can you just tell us what that means? Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're not even explaining. I don't know what you're saying. Like the words, I know the words are in English, but put together, I have no idea what you're saying. I don't know what you mean. Tell us what to expect. So I love that. That's brilliant. And Sean has put in the show notes for folks a link to Amazon to go buy this, buy the book. If you've had a diagnosis recently, this is what a great resource. So beautiful. There it is up on the screen.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's
So the
Sure.
first half of the book, I do kind of chronicle all three of my children's diagnoses, how we got them in place, and how we got all the services in place. But then from there, it just turns into this like informational book about how to find the resources, what the different debates are inside of autism. It's written from a neutral perspective so that parents can orient themselves on all of the things so they can begin to order their next best step.
You know what's so fascinating about this, unlike most other topics? For instance, I was mentioning off camera our friend Kelly Coleman. Kelly's book touches on everything you wish you knew when raising a child with special needs. The only way that one person can write a book on a subject like that and cover every single thing is if the book had 1 million pages and that person lived at least 1,000 years.
Right.
Because every situation and nuance is so like you're talking about your first diagnosis. I've got it now. I know. And as you're saying, that it is a SD spectrum disorder. You know that it could look different and it still gets by you. In our case, our son turned 18 in May, and I feel like there's a new diagnosis that's taking place because it's a different type of autism, because the things that you face at 18 as a neurotypical child just have a different meaning. It's like a new world. And I'm looking at, and I just sent it to her because I had never heard of PDA. Okay. And I'm like, I don't know that he defies authority per se, but what little crack or nuance is in there with turning 18 and hormones and that type of thing? Because and the one thing I'll say to anybody listening to is always remember, again, the questions versus the comments. Like we've had a tough, maybe week and a half, especially with him in terms of adjustments and things like that. And, I found myself, and I think this show is part of the reason for it. My wife gets another portion of the credit, is that I looked at him in moments of defiance, and saw pain and frustration. Yeah. And I don't think anybody's going to necessarily take away my fatherhood card here, but just being completely honest, unless he's crying at times or something like that, what's supposed to be emoted as pain or frustration because he can't express himself, which is a challenge because it's not as though he's nonverbal. When a child is nonverbal, you're just, what are they trying to say? When a child is able to string sentences together in addition to broken words, it's more difficult to see. And I hate to say it, but there's times when what he's emoting is frustration and maybe even pain and not being able to express something. And I receive it as anything but that, because he's bright and he's smart. So he's got to be telling me, hey, I'm trying to do what it is I want to do. And that's not what the message is. So the first thing to do is at least acknowledge that deciphering between the two can be difficult. So don't come down on your child, with the cultural, I'm your parent, and the reason why you do this because I say so. And at the same time, if you get it wrong, give yourself grace and take the lesson you've learned for it so that you can continue to move on, because you can't serve them from a place of self-destruction. You can't beat yourself up and continue to serve. So,
thank you for that, Sean. And I think, again, Amber, I mean, what an amazing contribution you've already made to us, but just pointing out that one nuance that, may help Sean have some additional answers. And I'm sure for anybody watching and listening, there's a lot of stuff that can be gleaned from this. And I think I'm just thankful for you that you're here. Let's talk about this, because you've written a book, and that's great. But then to your point that you made earlier, so then is Autism Savvy then the business you created around this? So let's talk about that a little bit. What is that all?
Yeah. I looked at the autism space and I said, where can I serve here? Like, there's so much need. Where can I serve? And I had an idea. Actually, I'm in the middle of a pivot right now. So like, there's what I intended, and where this goes, I'm not sure.
Love it.
Suffice it to say, yes, Autism Savvy is the company that I created around the book. I have been running a mom's group called the Infinity Mom Club. I seek to create a space where I can bring in the experts to them. This is so cool. Where they can, because a lot of moms are just like, I say moms because I serve moms, that of course I would serve anybody, but
Sure.
Parents, they're running to Facebook groups and they're asking questions, the blind leading the blind, that nobody has much business answering to each other. That, while you are the expert of your child, ultimately, a lot of the questions we have will only be resolved with a professional that can help you. And yet there's so many people stuck waiting for diagnosis, waiting for on wait lists for the services, right? And so I was like, how can I bring the resources and bring the experts to these moms? So I created a membership. In the beginning of the year, in April, I put on the Autism Savvy Summit, the While You Wait edition, and I brought in 25 professionals, for free to the community, like BCBAs, OTs, speech therapists, psychologists, and we just brought all the information to the parents that I wish that I could have had in the beginning. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing things like that. I had to commit to grow a social media platform, which I've never done before. Yeah. So starting Autism Savvy from scratch on Instagram and TikTok, and it's actually gone really well.
Beautiful.
So yeah, it's just been I'm not new to business, but I was new to trying to kind of have a business in the autism space. And it's been a journey, and I'm still figuring out, because then I got hit with all of these teachers and professionals that are looking for information too. I got to be a speaker at a summit back in July that was for special education teachers and SLPs. And there were 37,000 attendees at that summit.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the need for this just kind of cutting edge information surrounding autism is so great. I'm still figuring out where I'm going to fit in it. All I know is, go ahead.
No. I've finished that thought. All I know is my 3 children have their diagnoses, have the services that they've needed, are thriving. Our family has peace. Not that there aren't hard things, but Sure.
I want to help families get to that place.
Wow. That's beautiful. And by the way, go back to the very first thing that Sean asked you, he started to mention heroism, and you're like, no. That's heroic, what you've decided, what you've done with your situation, your choice to be of service immediately, and then the impact. How was yours? So let me just stop and say, bravo. That's huge.
Thanks.
That's huge. And
very much so.
We've been talking to people who serve the community for the last 4 years on this podcast. And I will tell you, you are a warrior and you are a hero, and the work that you're doing is absolutely amazing. So, and I'm telling you from experience, that's what you're doing is absolutely amazing. So kudos to you.
Thank you, because it's a grind, and
yes, it's right.
Hard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, life is hard, right? Everything is hard. We used to say in our business, right?
Pick your hard.
Being in debt is hard, and having your own business to earn money is hard. Pick your hard. Which one do you want to? Yeah. Which hard do you want to do? Pick your hard. For your summit, I'm fascinated by this. Was it in person? Was it on?
Was it virtual? Or was it in person?
It was virtual. Yeah, it was virtual. Mm-hmm.
How many attendees, more or less, were you able to attract?
Well, I was so proud that we had over 2,100 attendees.
Holy cow!
I was brand new to the space, brand new. I had no following. Like, yeah, I had written a book, but it wasn't published yet. And I was so grateful that I would like approach these professionals and be like, hi, this is what I'm doing. Will you come speak at my summit?
Oh
And
my
they
God.
all, I mean, pretty much everyone said yes. So that was cool.
That's amazing. 2,100 at your summit, and then 37,000 at this other summit. This is, you know, again, it gives us, you know, it just shows us as dads, because a lot of the times the mom is heavily involved in this work, and dads, you know, or, you know, either focused on, you know, building the support for the family, or they're just we're built, we got to fix things. Like men, we want to fix everything. And so we're at a place when if we can't do something that fixes something, right? And so all of those things that we deal with as men leave us out of the conversation. But Sean and I, literally, when I asked Sean, how you doing today? He says, I'm blessed. And I, Sean, just so you know, like, don't ever apologize for that, because we really are blessed to be doing what we do, because we are part of this community that is so, you know, so where they offer services that are so needed, where there are people like you that are out there serving this community and making a difference in the lives of so many, with one simple goal. I just want to help families get peace, have peace in their life. I mean, that is huge. So again, that's off.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. I
Really
appreciate it.
Yeah. And the most rewarding conversations, generally speaking, but especially here, are the ones that get wheels to turning. And mine are spinning very, very fast right now. So there's a couple of things we want to make sure we yes, definitely we'll talk after offline, because there's a couple of things that, at least one in particular, that I think you would bring tremendous value to and get immeasurable value from. So we'll talk about that after too.
Cool.
Yeah. I can't believe the way the time is running by.
Because
it always
does. It always happens, because it's a fascinating subject, and you're incredibly engaging and passionate about what you're doing. And so, you know, it makes it again, we're just interested parties asking questions, you know, and the fact that you do what you do is like, it's fascinating for us. And so the time always seems to fly by. Should we get to our question, Sean, since we're just about
I think it's about that time, especially because I think Amber is probably going to have a reflective answer that isn't short and
kind of anxious to hear it as well.
Oh gosh.
Which is this is the portion of the show where we asked, you know, it's probably one of the most valuable pieces or portions, I think. I think what we think is important, but how we think is even more important. And so, you know, our goal here is always to try and make the world in some way, shape, or form a better place than it was when we got here. Have tomorrow be better than today, better than yesterday. And so our ability to change the world in some way, shape, or form, no matter how great or small, is based upon our ability or our willingness to change ourselves. So with that said, think of just one example, at least one, where you had a thought or belief that you believe really strongly, but now no longer believe to be true.
Okay. My answer is changing in the moment. That's why I'm thinking.
As it does.
I know it's supposed to be one example. I just
well, that's why I said at least, because if you've got, that's why I figured you would have more than the average person. If you've got two, that's sometimes when we ask people and they're stumped, I tell them, look, if your answer is, I used to like pepperoni, but I don't, that's okay. If your answer is, I can't think of anything, then there might be some reflection that's needed, but there is no wrong answer. It's just about where one is at. So if you got two, that's fine.
Well, I mean, I'll say this simply and I'll elaborate if you want.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is in my bio, but it's really true. Autism. Autism used to be a word that I feared. And now autism is a word that I love.
Wow.
Okay. One, you don't have to elaborate on it, because if you look closely, you'll probably see a couple scars and some bruises, and these teeth are false and everything, because I do battle with each of those notions. We're like, autism is a gift. we're benefiting from it. There are things that are just so wonderful about this opportunity that has its dark moments and everything. And every now and then you're like, no, you know what? I just wish I could play catch or do whatever like everybody else, like all the time. And sometimes you're like, I just wish it would go away and I wish it wasn't here. And then when I'm in a more reflective mode, and my wife and I've talked about this, is like, if you could take it all away, and he had quote unquote normal conversations, would you want that? And I don't think she's ever been like, oh yeah, or just no, because you stop and think, what you love about this person, despite challenges, is so much of who they are.
Yeah.
You know? And so if you take it away, what do you lose? You know, because I don't think we ever really get over, and people don't talk about this enough. We talk about how you mourn when the diagnosis takes place, because having a child with, you know, great desire is a vanity thing to an extent, you know, at least a piece of it. I want to chip off the old block. I'm going to teach them about my favorite dolls or my favorite artist or singer or my favorite sports team or whatever have you. And you have this vision in your head as to who the child is going to be or how you mold or shape them or whatever. And it's so innate that you don't even realize that's what you're thinking. But then when all of that is shattered, you're like, that's all out the window.
Yeah.
Then, you know, that's different. And then when you get to your embrace of like, I love this child with all of me and who they are, complexities and everything. Then when you come back to the taking that away, you're like, wait a minute, what else do I lose?
Yeah.
So I just said you didn't have to elaborate, and I did that.
And then you elaborated.
Which was,
nope.
Yeah, which
that's powerful. But by the way, it's why, you know, for those who believe in a higher power and God, you know, that when you learn a lot about your child and you learn a lot about, you know, your ability to have that openness and learn is because of the gift that you've been given from God to be able to expand your heart and your empathy and your care for somebody else, which would not have been there otherwise. I remember thinking when my daughter was diagnosed that after the diagnosis, I was much more present as a parent. And I didn't realize that I wasn't present prior.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but it gave me the opportunity to be more present for all of my children because of that. And so, you know, so powerful. Really. Thank you for that. That was huge. We had a board meeting recently at one of our the We Are Brave Together organization that I was chatting with you about earlier. And there's you know, what we deal with is that by the way, Sean and I are always very emotional when it comes to this kind of stuff. So we talk about this. We wear our hearts on our sleeve. We are in that space between, I think, parents of children who have a diagnosis, that space between acute crisis and chronic hardship. Right? Because when you deal with an acute crisis, you can deal with the immediate in front of you. Chronic hardship. So we live in that space for those of parents with special needs issues. We live in the space between. And what you do with that is, you know, it's a blank canvas and anything that you can paint. And so your painting can have an impact on so many people. And you have expressed that. And for us,
we
grateful
discussed that in a monthly series that we just started called Things That Men Don't Typically Talk About. And when one of the things that we were talking about is how one faces a chronic situation versus an acute one. Which is, anyway, that's a whole nother episode, but it's a monthly series we're doing. And anyway, just wow, what a day.
So awesome. Well, listen, I would say that we love our guests. I think our love for our guests is also on a spectrum. There are some guests that we love, and there are some guests that we really love. I'm speaking for myself personally. I just want to, you know, give my love to you, like what you are doing and who you are in the world and who you are for your husband and for your children and for this community. God bless you, because you are really, you're living in that design that God had for you. And we're thankful for that. So
Oh,
thank
thanks, guys. I really appreciate you. This has been so, it's been fun, but like it's fed my soul. So thank you.
Good. That
that's
is
what it's all
that
about,
is
right?
that
Thank
is
you.
what it's all about, and that's what we would
Yeah.
want and hope. Yes,
Soul
definitely.
feeding. That's
Yeah.
what it's got to be. So as we
Yes.
wrap up this episode, and we hate to have to do that, but just to keep it in our time frame. First of all, just want to thank you. I always, first of all, thank you for people who, were able to sign on, and people who are listening and catching this, and, hit our YouTube channel, hit our website, click on the like and subscribe and share this content. I already know I've got a list of people I've been writing down who I want to send this episode to specifically. And so if you'll do that, we appreciate that. That's helpful. Thanks for making us part of your listening day. If you're listening on podcasts and down in US Virgin Islands on WSTX AM radio, thank you to Billy Footwear for being a partner with us in our mission here to impact as many people as we possibly can. And I always say, as we end the show, empathy and love. That's by the way, I've taken a break from social media with the exception of this podcast. But I used to tag all of my social media empathy and love because, we always need to have more empathy. We always need to look at a situation and not be judgmental, but understand what somebody's going through. We have no idea what they're going through. So having some empathy for our fellow man and fellow woman is really something to always be shooting for, and looking at the world through the lenses of love, just make the world a better place. And so with that, I'm personally going to thank you, Amber, for today, and I'm going to throw it to Sean to close us out. But what a really powerful episode. Thank you so much. Sean, you want to close us out here, my friend?
Yeah. Amber, just again, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for the time. Just to be able to add value where we walk and leave a footprint is what everything is about. In the words of the great Muhammad Ali, service to others is the rent that we pay for our room on earth. And we need to make sure that we are aware that, nobody's got a mortgage when it comes to the room on earth. It is for rent. Everybody's going at some point. So let's make the most out of the time that we're here and be as good to each other as we possibly can. Remember that questions are more powerful than statements. Be more childlike, less childish. We never know what somebody else is going through. And empathy takes work. That's something that, I've had people whose opinions I value kind of say, no, that shouldn't take work. It should be natural. It is on a very basic sense, but in the deepest effort to make the world a better place, it takes work, because we're naturally wired to look out for ourselves, but we need to make sure we look out for and take care of each other. And again, feel free to check the link on the screen to get to our YouTube channel, like, share, subscribe. We appreciate each and every one of you, and to each and everyone within the sound of my voice, we love you.
We love you. Don't forget the book, Not Atypical Motherhood. This is an amazing story. You'll feel well worth it. Thank you again for everybody.
Thanks, guys.